Grant Mercer decided Eliza Hart did not belong on Red Basin Ranch before both her boots had touched the ground. The stage left her beside a plum-colored trunk and a long wooden tool chest in a Wyoming yard full of dust, cattle noise, and men who had stopped working to stare. Eliza wore city gloves. Her dark traveling cloak had survived 3 days of rail soot better than Grant's best coat had survived one roundup. He looked from her structured hat to the brass corners on the tool chest. "A ranch is no place for a city woman," he said. The words reached every man by the bunkhouse. A few hands looked down to hide their smiles. One man near the pump whispered, "Stage can still catch the evening rail." Eliza heard him. So did Grant. Eliza did not blush or argue. She smiled, removed her gloves, and walked to the chopping block. An axe stood buried in a cottonwood round beside it. She pulled it free, tested the ash handle in both hands, and studied the wood instead of the audience. "That may be true," she said, "but you hired a builder, Mr. Mercer. Give the builder one fair test before you send the woman back." Grant had expected Mr. Edwin Hart, whose letters had offered to redesign Red Basin's leaning bunkhouse before the winter winds arrived. The final letter, apparently, had been signed E. Hart for a reason Grant now disliked. "One test," he said. "Fail it, and every man here will know why you were sent back before supper. Then the stage fare back to the rail spur is mine." Eliza turned the cottonwood round until a narrow split faced her. She set her feet, raised the axe, and brought it down once. The steel followed the grain. The round opened cleanly into 2 even pieces. The whisper near the pump died before the 2 halves hit the dirt. No wild swing, no second blow, no performance. She laid the axe down with the edge away from passing boots. "Your bunkhouse leans because the west wall has no proper crossbrace," she said. "If I am wrong, I leave before supper. If I am right, your men stop staring and unload my tools." Mateo Silva, Grant's foreman, coughed into his fist to hide a laugh. Grant looked at the building. He had blamed the settling earth for 2 years. "You saw that from the yard." "I saw the roofline from the stage." Something in him shifted then, though he would not have called it attraction. It was closer to the feeling he had when a difficult horse stopped fighting the bit and revealed it had only been waiting for a clear hand. "Mateo," he said, "unload Miss Hart's tools." Eliza inspected the bunkhouse before she accepted a room in town or a cup of coffee. She crawled beneath the raised floor, tapped joists with the wooden handle of a chisel, and emerged with dust on her slate-blue sleeve. "The foundation stones are sound," she told Grant. "The wall twists when the north wind strikes because your first builder saved time on bracing. I can correct it in 12 days if the lumber arrives tomorrow." Grant folded his arms. "And if it does not?" "Then I redesign around what you have. Wood does not care where a person was born." Mateo laughed openly this time. Grant did not, but the corner of his mouth moved, and Eliza noticed. By noon, she had every bunk measured and the men answering questions they had first pretended not to hear. She asked who slept near the stove, which window rattled, and where wet coats froze in November. She did not tell ranch hands how they ought to live. She asked how they did live, then changed her drawing. Grant watched her kneel in the dirt with a walnut square and white chalk. He had hired men who talked about buildings as monuments to themselves. Eliza talked about wind, wet boots, aching backs, and men needing one quiet hour after dark. That was when Rusk Tolley drove into the yard. Tolley bought cattle for an Omaha concern and hauled freight for half the ranches around Red Basin. His polished boots rarely touched mud, yet he always knew the price of a sick calf before its owner did. "Mercer," he called, "I hear you have a city architect building a palace for your cowhands." Eliza rose. Grant saw the small tightening around her mouth. "Miss Hart is rebuilding the bunkhouse," Grant said. Tolley swept off his hat and bowed too low. "Ma'am, forgive me. We do not often see ladies carrying axes." "Then your freight office must be remarkably free of kindling," Eliza said. Mateo turned away, shoulders shaking. Tolly stopped smiling for half a breath. Then he handed Grant a folded offer. The price for Red Basin's autumn herd was low enough to be insulting and high enough to look tempting to a man with a loan due in 6 weeks. Grant knew the paper mattered because the banknote came due in 6 weeks, and Tolly's wagons carried nearly every board, nail, and sack of feed within 50 miles. "Storm season is coming," Tolly said. "Your north fence needs replacing. Your bunkhouse appears ready to lie down. Sell now and sleep easy." "I will give you an answer after the drive," Grant said. Tolly glanced at Eliza's plans. "Every day you wait costs money." "Some days buy something worth having," she replied. After Tolly left, Grant asked how she knew the offer concerned money. Men like him only smile that carefully when they want a frightened answer. Grant studied her. "You read men as quickly as rooflines." "No, rooflines are more honest. If you like clean Western stories where respect has to be earned in public, subscribe and ride along." For the next 3 days, Red Basin changed its rhythm around Eliza. She worked beside the crew without pretending she could lift what Mateo could lift. She marked cuts, checked joints, and listened when an older hand named Wesley said the stove's smoke backed up in an east wind. She moved the vent in her plan. Grant found reasons to pass the bunkhouse more often than necessary. Once he brought a canteen and set it beside her without interrupting a measurement. Once he caught himself admiring the way a loose strand of chestnut hair curled against her freckled cheek, and he became so annoyed with himself that he spent an hour mending a gate that did not need mending. Eliza caught him at it. "That hinge will outlive us both," she said. It was loose. "It has become a monument to tightness." He laughed before he could stop himself. That evening, he drove her to Mrs. Bell's boarding house in town, as their contract required. He did not suggest that safety meant sleeping under his roof. He placed her tool chest in the locked shed Mrs. Bell provided, handed the key to Eliza, and waited until she had tested the latch herself. On the 4th evening, rain held them on Grant's porch after the crew had gone to supper. The prairie smelled of wet sage. Eliza sat with her hands around a coffee cup while Grant watched water run from the eaves. "My father taught me with that axe," she said. "He made cabinets, stair rails, church doors. When his lungs failed, customers started asking for the man of the shop. They had shaken my hand for 10 years and still believed I was carrying messages." "So you signed E. Hart?" "I signed the name on the business." Grant looked out across the dark yard. "I should have asked who was coming." "You should have." He accepted that without defense. "My younger brother died when a cattle chute failed," he said after a while. "I had trusted a fast builder who promised the brace was enough. Since then, anyone arriving with clean boots and promises has sounded like danger to me." Eliza's expression softened, but she did not excuse him. "Grief explains a locked door. It does not give you the right to close it on every stranger." "No," he turned toward her, "it does not." "I was wrong in the yard," Grant said. "Not because you split the wood. I was wrong before you touched the axe." That mattered more to Eliza than any apology offered after 12 perfect days. "Thank you," she said. By morning, Tolly had found a colder way to close one. The lumber did not arrive. Tolly's driver brought only a note claiming the rail depot had misplaced the shipment. Eliza rode with Grant to the spur and found her marked timbers stacked in planes sight behind freight reserved for Tolly's company. The depot clerk spread his hands. "Mr. Tolly controls the wagons, says Mercer freight waits until Monday." 2 teamsters behind the scale stopped loading and watched Grant absorb the insult. One glanced at Eliza's skirt, then at her tool chest, as if deciding whether she had already lost. Monday would cost them 4 days. A hard north wind was forecast for Sunday night. Tolly happened to be standing beside the freight scale. "Bad luck," he said. "Grant, my cattle offer remains open until sundown. Sell the herd and you can stop worrying about buildings." Eliza understood the shape of his plan. Delay the lumber. Make the ranch look fragile. Let the coming wind turn inconvenience into panic. Grant's jaw tightened. You have no claim on my freight. I have wagons. Out here that is almost the same thing. Eliza stepped between anger and a useless fight. There is an abandoned calving shed on the south rise. Its roof beams are old-growth pine. Most are dry and straight. Grant looked at her. That shed belongs to the ranch, but dismantling it takes labor. Then hire labor. Deduct it from my fee if my redesign fails. No. She blinked. You do not pay for Tolly's interference, he said, and you do not buy the right to finish work I hired you to do. He faced the depot clerk. Send my lumber back east if you must. I will not pay Tolly another $1 to move it. Tolly smiled. Then you will sell cattle cheap enough to cover the loss. No, Grant said. I will salvage my own timber and remember who held mine hostage. Back at Red Basin, Grant wrote a new line into Eliza's contract in front of Mateo. Additional labor and material delays belonged to the ranch, not the builder. Eliza's full fee remained due. So did the return fare Grant had promised if she chose to leave. That clean separation touched her more deeply than rescue would have. He was not making her indebted for believing in her. He was simply keeping his word. The salvage work gave Eliza a problem no drawing in Philadelphia had prepared her for. The old calving shed had been built from 3 kinds of pine, repaired across 20 winters by hands that disagreed about nearly everything. Some pegs were square, some were round. One roof beam curved like a tired back, and another had been scorched long ago by a lantern hung too close. She made the crew sort every piece into 3 piles, sound enough for weight, sound enough for walls and kindling. Wesley picked up a gray board and tossed it toward the first pile. Eliza caught one end before it landed. Wall pile. That board held a roof before you crossed the Mississippi. It also has beetle tracks through the heart. Wesley squinted at the wood. I do not see them. She passed him her small magnifying lens. Follow the dust from this hole. He looked, grunted, and moved the board himself. After that, he tested every timber before she asked. Grant watched that exchange from the doorway. She had corrected Wesley without making him small, and Wesley had changed his mind without losing face. Grant had spent years believing authority meant giving the right order loudly enough. Eliza made it look more like helping a person see what the work required. By afternoon, the salvaged beams lay beside the bunkhouse. Eliza showed Mateo how her revised brace would spread the wind's force across 2 walls instead of asking one post to bear it. Like 2 men carrying a sick calf in a blanket, Mateo said. Exactly. That explanation traveled faster than any measurement. Within an hour, every hand understood why the cuts mattered. Grant found Eliza at the water barrel washing pine pitch from her fingers. You make difficult things sound plain. A plan nobody understands is only a private drawing. My brother would have liked you. The words surprised both of them. Eliza dried her hands slowly. What was his name? Samuel. He sang badly. He believed every stray dog had been sent by Providence. Was he right? We had 9 dogs when he died. Her laugh was gentle, not pitying. Grant felt a memory that had been sharp for 6 years turn warm at the edges. You should tell me another story about him someday, she said. I would like that. It was the first future thing either of them had said. The next day, Tolly's pressure spread beyond the missing lumber. The smith in town refused to release a crate of nails already paid for, claiming Tolly had warned that Red Basin's credit was doubtful. Mrs. Bell received a message suggesting Eliza should collect a week's board in advance because Grant might soon be insolvent. By breakfast, 2 women at the boarding house had stopped speaking when Eliza entered the hall. Tolly's rumor had reached her before his wagon did. Eliza paid nothing extra. She carried her signed contract to the boarding house kitchen, placed it on the table without asking anyone to read private terms, and said, Grant Mercer owes me wages. I owe you board every Saturday. One rumor does not alter either promise. Mrs. Bell considered that, then tore Tolly's message in half. Saturday will do. At the smithy, Grant was ready to threaten the man with lost business. Eliza stopped him outside. If Tolly can make every disagreement look like your temper, he wins twice. I need those nails. We need fasteners. The old shed has oak pegs. Grant stared at her. You mean to build without iron? The oldest barns in Pennsylvania have stood 100 years, without asking permission from a nail. Back at Red Basin, she cut a sample joint. Mateo drove the peg home with a wooden mallet. The connection drew tight enough that two men could not twist it. Grant ran his thumb over the smooth oak. Tolly blocks iron, so you make the building stronger. Do not sound so surprised. It injures my pride. I am trying to preserve your pride. It appears expensive. Less expensive than your cattle buyer. Their smiles lingered. Mateo, passing with another peg, looked carefully at the sky. That night, Grant invited Eliza to supper at the long table with the crew. He did not place her at the head or announce that she had become one of them. He asked where she wanted to sit. She chose the middle, between Wesley and a young hand named Ben, where questions about the new wall came from both directions. Grant sat across from her. Conversation began stiffly, so Eliza asked Mateo how he had learned to judge weather. My mother's knees, he said. Then clouds, after I discovered her knees could predict rain in Mexico but not Wyoming. The crew laughed, and Eliza laughed with them. Tolly had tried to make her foreign to Red Basin. At that table, she became simply Eliza. After supper, he walked her to the hired buggy. The night was cold enough to turn their breath pale. I want you to know, he said, you never had to win them. Eliza looked back through the bunkhouse window. Respect cannot be demanded, Grant. It was the first time she had used his given name. No, he said quietly, but it should have been offered sooner. He handed her into the buggy, touching only her gloved hand. The contact lasted 1 second longer than necessity. Neither pretended not to feel it. At Mrs. Bell's, Eliza found a telegram from her former Philadelphia client. A hotel wanted walnut paneling designed for its new dining room. The fee was generous. The deadline required her to leave Wyoming on Thursday as planned. She read the message 3 times. If she stayed, Eastern clients might decide E. Hart had vanished again. If she left, Tolly would tell every man in Red Basin that a woman could design courage only until the train arrived. 6 months earlier, she would have accepted before removing her hat. The commission was proof that Eastern customers had begun to recognize her name. Yet when she imagined the work, she saw a finished room admired by men who would never know who had drawn it. When she imagined Red Basin, she saw Grant listening when she corrected him, Mateo testing her ideas, and a wind-bent building becoming straight beneath many hands. She disliked that Grant had become part of the decision. She liked even less how much she would miss him. The following morning, Eliza did not mention the telegram. Concealing it felt dishonest, but announcing it before she knew her own mind felt like asking Grant to persuade her. Tolly arrived at noon carrying a new cattle offer and saw the oak-pegged frame standing without his nails. For the first time, his polished calm cracked. Salvage wood, he said, a fitting monument to a failing ranch. Eliza stood on the bunkhouse floor while the crew raised the first crossbrace. A failing ranch would have sold to you yesterday. Tolly looked up at her. Your train leaves Thursday. Men here will live with whatever your cleverness costs. He said it loudly enough for the crew to hear. Wesley's hand tightened around the rope. Ben looked at Eliza, then down at the unfinished brace. The remark struck because it contained a truth. She could leave. They could not. Grant heard it too. Any cost in that building is mine, he said. Any credit is hers. Tolly handed him the offer. Grant tore it once and returned both halves. You may regret performing for her, Tolly said. I am not performing. I am correcting a mistake. Tolly climbed back into his wagon. Owen, holding the reins, avoided Eliza's gaze. That afternoon, the crew raised the brace. Eliza stood below with the guide rope, calling small corrections while 6 men lifted. The timber settled into its joint with a deep wooden knock. Mateo drove the first oak peg. Grant drove the second. They all stepped back. The wall stood straight. Eliza felt the satisfaction she always felt when separate measurements became one solid thing. But this time, when she looked across the room, Grant was watching her instead of the wall. "What?" she asked. "Nothing." That is plainly untrue. He walked closer, stopping at a respectful distance. "You smile differently when something holds." No one had ever told her that. "Perhaps I like trustworthy structures," she said. "Then I have much to prove." The lightness left his voice on the final words. Eliza saw the man beneath the ranch owner's certainty, someone who wanted her regard and was afraid he had asked for it too late. She almost told him about Philadelphia. "Instead," she said, "begin by checking the west sill. It is an 1/8 inch proud." Grant smiled. "Yes, ma'am." The crew dismantled the old shed that afternoon. Eliza found 6 sound beams and altered the design so none was wasted. Grant worked beside her until moonrise. When the last beam came down, they sat on it in the lantern glow, shoulders near but not touching. "You could go back east when this is done," he said. "I could. Philadelphia has work, and men who call me useful after someone else signs the drawing. Red Basin has one man trying to learn faster than that." She smiled, trying. If this quiet fight for respect feels familiar, subscribe for more frontier romances where choice matters. On the 7th day, a letter arrived from the rail office confirming Eliza's return ticket for the following Thursday. Grant carried it from the ranch mailbox to the bunkhouse and felt each step grow heavier. She had not deceived him. Her contract ended Wednesday. The ticket was sensible. Yet the idea of the yard without her slate blue dress and plain-spoken corrections made the ranch look emptier than it had before she came. He gave her the letter unopened. "Your road stays yours," he said. Eliza read his face. "You sound as though you dislike that road." "I dislike where it leads." Before she could answer, Tolly entered the yard with 2 wagons and 4 hired men. He announced that Grant's loan would be bought by his Omaha concern if the herd sale was not signed by morning. It was a bluff, but a dangerous one. Ranch rumors could move faster than bank letters. Tolly addressed the crew. A sensible owner would stop paying men to rebuild a bunkhouse he may not own by winter. Mateo stepped forward. A sensible buyer would leave when told no. Tolly's gaze settled on Eliza. "You have done enough damage with city notions. Take your ticket." Grant moved, but Eliza lifted one gloved hand. "Mr. Tolly is trying to make me the argument," she said. "I am not. His price is the argument, and it is still poor." Grant looked Tolly in the eye. "Leave my ranch." Tolly left, but his driver, Owen Pike, glanced back twice. Eliza noticed a dark, wet patch on the canvas behind his wagon seat and the sharp smell of kerosene. Freight drivers carried lamp oil, so she said nothing. Still, unease followed her into the evening. They finished the west brace before sundown. The bunkhouse stood square for the first time in years. Mateo rolled a marble across the floor, and when it stopped instead of racing toward the wall, the crew cheered. Grant found Eliza alone outside, brushing sawdust from her jacket. "Stay through the north wind," he said. "I would value your inspection." As the builder, he paused. "And after that, if I ask something else, you may answer as yourself." Her eyes warmed. "That is a better question than the one you asked in the yard." The shout came from the tack room. Smoke rolled beneath its door. An orange line climbed the wall nearest the corral, where more than 200 cattle had been gathered for the drive. Wind struck from the north and pushed sparks across the pens. Men ran for barrels. Grant ordered the outer gate opened. It moved 1 foot and stopped. A roof brace, burning at one end, had dropped across the gate track. Cattle crowded away from smoke, pressing toward the narrow opening. If the gate failed suddenly, they would crush through one another. If it stayed shut, fire would reach the dry rails. Grant seized the brace. Heat drove him back. Eliza saw the whole structure as grain and weight. The fallen timber was not holding the roof. It was wedged between the gate and a post, bearing down at an angle. One cut at the narrow, burned section would release the weight away from the herd. "Wet blankets on the near rail," she called. "Mateo, clear every man from the gate mouth. Grant, rope the loose end and pull south when I say." Grant's hand moved toward the axe by instinct. Then he stopped. The old yard insult stood between them for one breath, and he stepped aside. 7 days earlier, he would have taken it from her. Now he asked, "Where do you need me?" "On that rope, trust the Count." He ran. Eliza wrapped a wet cloth over her hair and stepped to the brace. Smoke stung her eyes. She did not swing wildly. She found the split already opened by heat and struck where the wood had chosen to break. Once. The brace cracked. Pull. Grant and 2 hands hauled the loose end south. Eliza struck once more. The burned section separated and fell into the cleared dirt, away from the cattle. The gate rolled open. Mateo and the crew opened a lane with ropes and steady voices. Grant mounted and turned the lead cattle toward the empty east pasture. The herd flowed out, frightened but controlled. Eliza did not stand admiring what she had done. She joined the bucket line. Together they kept the fire to the tack room wall and a short stretch of corral. No one was hurt. When the last flame had become steam and black timber, Owen Pike walked from the shadows beside Tolly's empty wagon. Soot marked one sleeve. His face looked sick. Tolly arrived minutes later, demanding to know whether Grant was finally ready to sell before the whole ranch burned. Owen stared at him. Then he spoke loudly enough for Grant, Eliza, Mateo, and 3 neighboring ranchers on the bucket line to hear. "Tolly ordered me to leave the kerosene by the tack, while so Mercer would panic and sell." Mateo stopped coiling the rope and looked straight at Owen, as if giving him room to speak. Tolly swung toward him. "You will never drive another paid mile if you say that again." Owen swallowed, looked at the burned gate, and raised his voice. "Then hear it plain. He told me where to put the oil. You lit it. You said it would only smoke. Then you barred the side door." Grant stepped toward Tolly, but Eliza touched his sleeve. "Do not give him a fight he can use," she said. Tolly lifted his chin. "You still have a damaged corral, a loan due, and a herd losing weight. My offer drops 10% at dawn." That was his countermove. Even exposed, he tried to keep control through fear. Grant looked at the blackened wall, the open gate, and his cattle safe beneath the moon. "There will be no sale to you," he said. Ada Cole stepped away from the bucket line first. The others followed only after they saw she was not afraid. "And no more hauling from my place," she said. Another rancher said, "Nor mine." The third nodded. "Owen can drive for us if he is ready to tell the sheriff the same truth." Ada pulled Tolly's freight token from her coat pocket and dropped it into the mud. The second rancher did the same. The third handed his token to Owen. Tolly lost his smile. In less than a minute, he had lost the forced sale commission, 3 freight accounts, his driver, and the silence he had purchased with wages. Eliza did not ask the crowd to curse him. She did not need the whole territory to change its heart. She needed his leverage made useless. "Leave," Grant said. No one moved to help Tolly climb into his wagon. He left alone. At dawn, the north wind struck Red Basin. The rebuilt bunkhouse did not move. The tack rooms smelled of wet ash, but the crew had already cleared the ruined boards. Grant sent Owen and Ada Cole to make their statement in town. Then he gathered the men beside the bunkhouse's west wall. Eliza stood before them in her charcoal jacket, tired eyes bright above a soot-smudged cheek. Grant held out the white carpenter's chalk. "This building stands because Miss Hart designed it," he said. "The cattle live because she saw the way out and we followed her. From this morning, Every rebuilding decision on Red Basin is hers while her contract lasts. He placed the chalk in her palm. The same men who had watched her arrive like a joke now waited for her first mark. It was not permission to matter. It was public recognition of authority she had already earned through years no one there had witnessed. Eliza looked at the crew. Then we begin with a tack room that has 2 doors and no hidden corner for lamp oil. Mateo grinned. Yes, ma'am. Grant paid her full original fee that afternoon and signed a new 6-month contract for the tack room, north fence sheds, and a small ranch office. The contract included a room at Mrs. Bell's boarding house and enough money for travel whenever she chose. No line mentioned marriage, gratitude, or staying. Only after Eliza had read it twice and locked her copy inside her own tool chest did Grant walk with her to the first new beam. I have another question, he said. She turned the chalk between her fingers. Ask it properly. Will you let me court you while you work here? Supper on Sundays, rides when you choose. No answer owed at the end of the contract. Eliza considered him with the same calm attention she had given the Cottonwood round. You once told me a ranch was no place for a city woman. I was a fool in a good hat. The hat is debatable. He laughed, and hope changed his whole face. She placed her gloved hand in his. 6 months of courtship, then I decide whether the ranch has learned enough to keep me. The ranch. Its owner is part of the inspection. The next morning, Eliza stood in the same yard where the men had once watched to see if she would be sent back before supper. This time, they waited for her chalk mark before lifting the first beam. Grant stood beside her, not ahead of her. She drew the first white line, and only then did the crew lift. Her axe rested against the plum-colored trunk, no longer a test, no longer a challenge, simply one useful tool among many she had brought west. And when the winter wind came hard across Red Basin, the bunkhouse held, the cattle stayed safe, and no man there ever again mistook polish for weakness. If you want more clean Wild West romances built on courage, respect, and free choice, subscribe and join us for the next story.